So is Quantumania the great start that MCU Phase 5 needs? Is it another forgettable Marvel project? Or does it just fall flat on its face like Thor Love and Thunder? Find out all of that after this. Yo, what is up YouTube? Noezone here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This is the first movie in Phase 5, and it's the third installment in the Ant-Man franchise, which is kind of insane to say that he got a trilogy before any of the DCU heroes did. But to move on to the plot synopsis of this movie follows the entire Ant fam getting accidentally sucked into the quantum realm, where they explore and interact with strange new creatures, and embark on an adventure that pushes them beyond the limits of what they thought was possible, while also finding out about the brand new big bad of the MCU, Kang the Conqueror. But guys, that's basically the rundown before I get into what I think of the movie, and this will be a non-spoiler review. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into the review. Starting out with what I wanted going into it. I wanted this movie to be just as fun and lighthearted as the first two, because I really do think that Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp are very decent to good movies, but they're not anywhere near the top of my personal MCU ranking. They would probably sit somewhere around the middle of the pack. I also wanted a great performance out of Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror, because he will be the next Thanos of the MCU, so I needed him to come out swinging. I needed a pretty good performance out of Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, which is something that he usually delivers on, and I absolutely love him in the role, and his comedy in the MCU has always been perfect to me. I was also curious about Cassie's new actress, Katherine Newton, and how she would end up handling the role. I wanted some stellar visuals to look at, especially in the quantum realm, and lastly, I was very hyped to see how Quantumania sets up the future for the next couple of phases and the MCU as a whole, because the main writer of this movie, Jeff Loveness, said this very interesting thing at last year's D23 Expo. He said that this movie will lead directly into Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, and he will also screenwrite that movie as well. But now it's time to talk about what I took away after watching Quantumania. And first up are my positives. I think that Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror was absolutely amazing, because he had a ton of chilling lines, which he accomplishes by having some impeccable delivery on them. He had a lot of great scenes and moments, especially in the third act where I feel like his character shined the most. He also proved himself to be a top tier villain in the MCU, and he's only been in this movie so far. I also need to praise the physicality that Jonathan Majors has brought to the role, because this man got jacked for this role, and it really makes you see how imposing of a villain he is. Like, to be honest, I thought there were times where Jonathan Majors thought he was in Creed 3 instead of Ant-Man. Overall, he is easily the best part of the movie though. I think that Paul Rudd as Scott Lang was great as always, and as expected, he had a lot of great jokes, and he also gets a lot more to do emotionally with the character than before, especially in one scene that I will not spoil. I also like Scott Lang's relationship with his daughter Cassie, and how she's consistently stayed as his main motivation throughout his entire trilogy. It just adds a really sweet note to the familial aspect of these Ant-Man movies. I think that Michelle Pfeiffer as Janet Van Dyne was pretty good in this, and that's honestly a pretty big plus because a lot of screen time is devoted to her. I also enjoyed a lot of the visuals from the quantum realm, and they felt very similar in quality to some of the visuals we got in the first Doctor Strange movie, which is a relief to say because the visual effects in a lot of recent Marvel projects have looked really rough. And this is one of the most CGI intensive projects since Love and Thunder, and we all know how trash that movie ended up looking. I liked how big the stakes were for an Ant-Man movie, and how it kept the wacky tone of the first two, while also giving us a much more intimidating villain. Lastly, I was really intrigued by what this movie set up for the future of the MCU, and the two post-credit scenes that we got were some of the best ones we've gotten in a while. But I will add that I'm getting kind of tired of watching MCU movies that just set up other MCU movies that I would rather be watching than the current project. I know that's kind of weird to say in the positive section of the review, but it kind of directly related to my last point, so we putting it here. Next up are the things I felt mixed about in Quantumania, and while I think MODOK was a good addition to the movie, by the end of it, he just feels kind of wasted, to be honest. But he had some of the funniest moments in the movie, so that's why he's in the mixed. I think that Katherine Newton as Cassie Lang was just really average. She gets some of the worst dialogue in this movie, has little to no chemistry with Paul Rudd, and most of her line delivery is just straight up bad. But I did enjoy her heroic traits that she had, so those kind of save her character for me. And this is not a knock against the actress at all, because I enjoy her in a lot of other things that she's been in. I just personally did not enjoy her in this movie. I do think she needs a lot more room to grow, but I still want to see her back for a Young Avengers project, possibly. Michael Douglas as Hank Pym is kind of just there. He had some of the biggest NPC moments that I've ever seen in the MCU, which is not surprising at all, to be honest, especially because he said in a red carpet interview that he would only come back for a fourth Ant-Man movie if they killed him off. So I think he's just kind of tired of being in the MCU at this point. I did like the cinematography for the most part, mostly just in the quantum realm, but other than that, there wasn't anything too special about it in my opinion. Next up are my negatives of Quantumania. I think that a lot of the dialogue in this movie is just very corny corny and dumb. And I think the two characters that are the biggest offenders of this are Cassie and Modok. But I will admit that none of the lines or jokes in this movie are near as offensive as Love and Thunder's. But I still feel like this needs to be said because Marvel has been getting way too complacent lately with what they've been letting past the writer's room. And I think that Love and Thunder, She-Hulk, and this movie are some of the biggest consequences from that. I think that Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne is okay, but my true gripe with her character in this movie is that she barely gets to do anything. And mind you, she's one of the two title characters, but she just feels like a background character and has little to no arc in the story. But last up are my overall thoughts on Quantumania. I think that this movie ranges from an above average to a good MCU movie. It has by far the biggest scale and stakes of the Ant-Man franchise, some great visuals to look at, a few stellar performances, a great introduction to the new big bad of the MCU, Kang the Conqueror, and gave the fans an intriguing future to look forward to in the next couple of phases. But I feel like this movie suffers from having some shallow character arcs, a lot of bad and corny dialogue, and a couple of bad or just no effort performances. Which leads me to my final score of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and I think I'm settling around a 6.5 out of 10. This movie isn't going to blow you away like a No Way Home will, but it will entertain you around the same level as the first two Ant-Man movies. And I personally think that it's worth watching in theaters, but I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to wait for this one to release on Disney+. But anyways, if you enjoyed my review, make sure you leave a like on it. It really helps out the channel a lot. Make sure you share the video with a friend if you think they would enjoy it as well. Leave a comment on your thoughts on Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. And as always, guys, it's been Noezone. Peace.